And that dream really bothered him. And he wanted someone to interpret that dream for him. So he called all the wise men and all the magicians and all the sorcerers, soothsayers, whatever. And he called them in and said, I want you to tell me, what does this dream mean? And they told him, tell me the dream, and we'll tell you what it means. And he said, what he told them, and I don't know if it's true, but it may be, he said, I forgot the dream. You tell me what my dream was, and then I'll know you can tell me what the interpretation is. And they said, hey, listen, no king has ever asked this of any wise men before, of any magicians or anything. It cannot be done. Only the gods can reveal this to you. And he said, well, if you can't reveal it to me, then I'm going to kill you. You're going to die, and we're going to cut you in pieces and your family and everything else. And so they couldn't do it, and the edict went out to go slay all the, and of course Daniel and his 3 friends were part of those guys. But Daniel didn't know anything about it, and why that would be, I have no idea. But he didn't know anything about it, and so he went to the head guy that was slaying them all, and he said, hold on, give me a little time, and I will tell the dream. And then he started praying to God, and he actually went to his 3 friends and said, start praying. Yes, the God, yeah. And start praying to God. And that he'll reveal this to us. And of course he revealed it to Daniel. And that's where we're going to pick it up. And so Daniel's going to go to the king. And so this, and I want to remember that the writing now is all in Aramaic. So when I look up the meanings of the word, I get a little thing that says Aramaic, right? Instead of Hebrew. The first chapter was Hebrew, and then when we get to the end of the book, it's going to be in Hebrew again. But this in-between stuff is in Aramaic, and because it was written for the nations. Because it's going to describe that today we're going to see, it's going to be quite amazing. He's going to show this is what the future is going to be. Because that's what Nebuchadnezzar's dream is all about. And Daniel will tell him that. So we have Daniel 2, and we're going to start at verse 24. It says, therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, don't destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me before the king, and I will show to the king the interpretation. Bold statement. And then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, because he didn't want to go wipe out all the people. So he did it in haste, so he didn't have to do that. And said thus to him, I have found a man of the children of the captivity of Judah, who will make known to the king the interpretation. So there you go. Daniel said, take me to the king, and I will tell him. So the king answered Daniel. Daniel gets before the king, whose name was, someone was asking about this earlier, Belteshazzar. Interesting name, huh? He said to Daniel, I'm going to say Daniel, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation of it? So he asked Daniel right out, can you make known to me the dream, and then after you make known to me what the dream was, show me the interpretation? Yeah, maybe. I'm still not sure whether he really forgot it, but because the dream was terrifying to him. And we'll see that as we go on here. So Daniel answered. What do you think Daniel's going to answer? He answered before the king, and he said, the secret which the king has demanded can neither wise men, enchanters, magicians, nor soothsayers show to the king. He said, there isn't a man on the planet. Because the guy just asked him, can you show me? And so Daniel's saying, there isn't a man there isn't a wise man, which Daniel was one of them. And there isn't an enchanter, there isn't a magician, there isn't a soothsayer, no horoscope, no whatever that can tell you what your dream was and what it means. And so he says, when he says that, he says, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. That word secrets is mysteries. This is like a mystery. And God loves to reveal mysteries, and he has a lot of them. He has a lot of secrets, mysteries. And it's really for us to figure those out. And a lot of those are right in his very word. They're right there in his very word. So there is a God in heaven. Now remember, this is written in Aramaic. I want to let you know that. So this word for God is Elah, of what's there Aramaics, and people get Allah. Yeah, so if you were reading this in what it was written, it said there is a Allah in heaven. Yeah, isn't that interesting? So if you look that up in the Aramaic language that it was written in, that's what it'll say, an Elah. But it's E-L-L-A, not A-L-L-A-H. It's E-L-L-A-H. But that's just how they pronounce it and stuff. But I thought that was interesting because I never really knew that before. I found that out myself as I was looking at the words and their meanings in their original language. Anyway, so he reveals mysteries, this God that is in heaven, okay? And he has made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. So Daniel's saying, God is showing you what's going to happen towards the end. And that word latter days means in the last or the end. The last days, the end days. He's going to show you everything that's going to happen all the way through the last days, right? And he goes on and he says, your dream and the visions of your head on your bed are these. Okay, and then we'll go over those. In fact, let's do that before I'll go back to that other one. But he says, as for you, O king, your thoughts came into your mind on your bed, what should happen hereafter. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will happen. So we'll stop right there. God is the God that reveals things. I want you to notice that Nebuchadnezzar, it says that he was thinking about things. So it says, as for you, O king, your thoughts came into your mind on your bed. This isn't the dream. This is what he was thinking about before the dream. Okay? So he was thinking about what would happen after he died. You know, what's going to happen? And I don't know if other people think about it. I guess I think about that sometimes. How the world's going to be in 50 years or how it's going to be in 100 years. I think about that stuff too. And Nebuchadnezzar was obviously thinking about that. And that's why he had his dream, because he was pondering that. That word for thoughts is really to cogitate, to ponder what is going on. And so God was going to tell him what that is, because God is the revealer of mysteries, of secrets. And one of the things in Isaiah that God, one of the ways we know that God is because he knows what's going to happen from start to finish, right? And so one of the big things, people ask me, well, how do you know that God wrote the Bible? I said, because the Bible can tell what happened in the past, it can tell you what's going to happen now, and it's going to tell you what's going to happen in the future. And it's perfect. It doesn't ever miss. And that's what God, in Isaiah, he challenges any other god, small g, to try it. And that's what he says. He says, let them, small gods, announce and declare to us what will happen. Uh-huh. I would imagine, yeah. I'm sure that kings had recorders and stuff, yeah. Yeah, no, Yeah, they would do that. And so God says, let them declare what will happen. You see, declare the former things. That's the things of the past, right? Declare the former things. Who knows how the world started? Who knows? Who was there when Adam was there and Eve was there? Who knows? And the only one that can record it accurately is God in His words, or in His Word. And He's the only one that knows. Now, did you know there are a lot of legends about Adam and Eve in all different countries, but they're just legends. They aren't necessarily accurate, right? They're close to accurate, but they're not perfectly accurate. They're legends, they're myths, we would call them. Okay? And most myths and legends have their origin in truth. Yeah, and so flood, all that. People have legends about that, myths about that. But God says, I got it right. Let them declare the former and what they are. And the thing about what God says, when we, with, quote, science, archaeology, whatever you want to call it, we always find that God is right. That's what archaeology discovers. Not that God's wrong, that God's right. And it's just weird. So he says, declare the former things that are, that we may consider them. We need to consider the past, right? And know the latter end of them, what all's going to happen. Okay? Or show us things to come. Declare the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know you are gods. See, that's a challenge. Tell us what's going to happen hereafter. That show us things to come is an interesting word, because it literally means what's going to come next in time. Or kind of almost like the present. What's going to happen this afternoon? God can tell you exactly what's going to happen this afternoon because He's God. Other guys can't. Only He knows. But He also knows what's going to happen at the very end. That's the hereafter. And that means towards the end. That Aramaic word means at the end, at the latter times. Because you're God's, go ahead, do it. He says, yes, do good, do evil, that we may be dismayed and see it together. He's just challenging, do something, say something, prove you're a God. And, of course, guess what? They can't do that, right? So we had Nebuchadnezzar with these thoughts, and he was thinking about it, and he says that God is the one who reveals the mystery. And he said, but as for me, and I love the humility here, right? He says, as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any other man. He said, I'm not smarter than anyone else. And it wasn't revealed to me because I am smarter than anyone else. He said, it was revealed to me, he says, but to the intent that the interpretation may be made known to the king. That's why it was revealed to Daniel, so Daniel could take it and tell Nebuchadnezzar what that dream meant. It literally is so God could tell all mankind what was going to happen. We got a timeline for us. God has given us a timeline. And we would call it the time of the Gentiles and what it's going to look like. And so he said that the interpretation of the king, that you may know the thoughts of your heart, that you may know, because he was pondering, remember, he was pondering what's going to happen to this world after I'm gone. What's going to happen? And he was pondering that, and he had this dream, and so he was agitated. He was afraid. He was fearful. So that to know what what this dream meant. So Daniel's going to tell him exactly what he saw. This is what you saw, King Nebuchadnezzar. You saw, and behold, a great image. Okay, a great image. That word great means large. That word image means illusion. In other words, it was a dream. It stood for something. Right? So you saw this large image, and this image which was mighty, and whose brightness was excellent. So as he's dreaming this dream, this image is bright. It's really shining. And it's gigantic. And he said, it stood before you, and the aspect of it was what? Awesome. Or excellent. Yeah, it means that it was, the word in the Aramaic, it means to slink in fear, to cower in fear. So it's like it was scary. And that's one of the reasons I think that he really did remember the dream. But if he didn't, Daniel's laying it out there for him so that he can remember what it said. And so it was just this gigantic statue. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it very well could have. And so, yeah, that happened with him, and it was gigantic. So Daniel goes on to explain. He says, as for this image that you saw, and it's kind of a weird dream. I don't know. The image, its head was of fine gold, and its breast and its arms of silver, its belly, so from here, belly, and its thighs of brass, its legs of iron, and its feet part of iron and part of clay. So we're going from the head to the feet. Now what happens, as you're looking at this verse, what happens to the metals that we see here? They get less valuable and less valuable and less valuable, right? You go from gold and you end up with iron and clay mixed together, right? So, yeah, kind of, yeah. But so the kingdoms got less and less valuable with time, and I found that interesting. The head is single as well, where the breasts and the arms are two, right? Like maybe a split, and the belly and the thighs are like two, and we know that happened. And then the legs on down to the very feet. That even includes the toes. How many toes are there? 10. We'll see. Maybe that number is important on the number of toes that we have. But so we see these metals that get less and less valuable over time. However, they get more and more strong. So I don't know if you know this, but gold is real soft. And you can actually take your fingernail and dent gold pretty easily. That's one of the ways you can tell if it's real gold or not, is because it's soft. And silver's soft too, but it's not as soft as gold. To bite it, yeah, exactly, yeah. That's kind of where that came from. You bite a gold coin to make sure that it's gold, because it'll make a nice impression there, because gold is kind of soft. And then the belly and the thighs are brass, so the metals are getting stronger, but they're getting less valuable. And then, of course, iron's probably the strongest metal there is. That's why you make stuff out of them, right? What do we make tanks out of? We don't make them out of gold or silver. We make them out of iron, steel. Yeah, that too. But Yeah, and we're going to see that play out, I think, too. So you got to think this is an image and it's a representation of something. Okay? And of course, Daniel's going to give us the interpretation, so we don't have to really try to interpret it too much for ourselves. Well, he goes on. He said, and also in this dream, King Nebuchadnezzar, you saw a stone that was cut out without hands, and it struck the image on its feet that were of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, and the brass, and the silver, and the gold broken in pieces together and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that there was no place found for them. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Okay? So we see a stone that was cut without hands. Now, what does that mean? Stone that was cut without hands. That'd be okay. Yeah, and that's probably exactly what that means. That it was of God. This stone is of God. Literally, you could say the stone is God. And we'll see that stone is Jesus is called the chief cornerstone, right? And he's called the rock of salvation. I mean, all kinds of images you can find for Jesus and stone, and we'll see a couple of those as we go on. But we see this great stone. But he's going to tell us. Daniel's going to interpret this for us here in a minute anyway. And it struck the image where? Okay. So when is Jesus going to come back and defeat all the armies of the world? Because remember, that statue, literally, it's all the nations. This has to do with nations. What's that? Down through the nations down through the ages. But he's going to come and he's going to strike them on the feet. The feet are at the end of time. In the last days, the end of the Gentile reign. So remember this timeline we're seeing from Nebuchadnezzar down all the way, but we're still in the time of the Gentiles. We're still here. And Jesus is going to come, though, and he's going to... Now, he came the first time for a different reason, but he's coming the second time to rule. Yeah. No, that's right. And it's all about the Gentiles. You'll find Daniel is a lot about that. That's why it's written in Aramaic, right? It's just the way God did things is just amazing to let you know this is the one true God giving you the timeline of the world. And it's just amazing. Anyway, so the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. That just means that his kingdom reigned over all the earth, the whole planet. Yeah. If you don't like dictatorships, guess what? You're going to have, or there's going to be one. And when Christ rules, he is a dictator. Now, he's a good dictator because he will rule in righteousness and justice, where the dictators of today, although there might be some that are okay, they're men and they're sinful. And they have, I mean, because we in America, you know, we grew up free. And we could literally do whatever we want. And I guess that's a good thing. For the most part, I'm happy with that. The problem is we're sinful men and women, and so we don't always choose well. Yeah, right. Yeah, and so that has a lot to do with it. There used to be monarchies, you know. The king, you know the saying, it's good to be the king, because you could do whatever you wanted to. And the kings were like a dictator. They ruled the whole thing. And that's what, like Nebuchadnezzar, right? And you could go down to the kings of England, the kings of France. They were all dictators. Yeah. And they decided what was going to happen or not happen. Okay? And so we have this this great mountain. And the word for the mountain, by the way, can mean rock or hill. So it can mean just a big compressed rock. And the word for great here isn't large like it was earlier, like the statue was. It means chief, number one. The number one, so you could say that's the chief rock. Isn't that interesting? So Daniel says, that's your dream. That's what you saw. You saw this image and you saw all that stuff. And Nebuchadnezzar's going, whoa. Right? Now Daniel says, I'm going to tell you what it means. I'm going to tell you what that dream means. Yeah. You know, and that's interesting. I'm glad you said that, because I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were there with him. And that's where we get the we from. So I'm glad you said that. Yeah, that we is his friends were with him. Remember, they prayed with him. They were with him when he got the interpretation and all that kind of stuff. I'm not so sure that they didn't even room together. They may have, they may not have, but I think they may have. And so he's given them some credit here, I think. And that's just the kind of person Daniel was. So here's our interpretation of this large image, and I'll show you a picture that we've made of the image here in a minute. But Daniel says, "You, O king, are King of Kings." Ooh, that sounds like a familiar title, doesn't it? Yeah. In other words, you're the only one ruling on the planet, right? You are the King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom. Who gave Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom? The God of heaven. And Daniel wants him to understand that you didn't get this because you're someone special, Nebuchadnezzar. You got this because God gave it to you. He could have given it to a donkey if he wanted to. That God can do that, right? He can speak through a donkey. He could give a kingdom to a donkey. But he gave it to Nebuchadnezzar, and he said, God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the strength, and the glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, and the animals of the field, and the birds of the sky, he has given into your hand. Okay? And has made you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Pretty simple. Easy interpretation for Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar. You're the head of gold. God placed you there, and he gave you the power, he gave you the strength, and he gave you the glory, because he's the one that does that. He can give it to whoever he pleases. He can give us strength, power, and glory if he so desires. He can do whatever he wants because he is God, and he's behind it all. And so he starts with the head of gold, and he says, Nebuchadnezzar, that is you. Oop. Whereas you saw, well, we went back too many. One more. There we go. See, after you, he says, another kingdom will arise inferior to you. What's inferior mean? Not as powerful, not as strong. Inferior, in fact, it was a divided kingdom. That's why we call it, what we call that kingdom? Medo-Persia. Okay, two rulers. Another kingdom will arise that's inferior to you, just like the metal got what? Cheaper, right? And another third kingdom of brass, and this third kingdom will bear rule over all the earth. This third kingdom is going to subdue literally all the known earth at that time. And you know what empire we call that? the Greek Empire. And look at all the influence they had over the whole earth. Yeah. And the fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron. How strong is iron? We already kind of said that, right? It's real strong. Because iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things. And as iron that crushes all these, it will break in pieces and crush. Whoa. Yeah, it will break in pieces and crush. Well, and there's going to be more dreams about all this that are going to happen. Daniel's going to have his own dreams. But we're talking about the Roman Empire are the legs of iron, and I'll have a statue for you here in just a minute that kind of show that. And then, no, there it is, but doggone it. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes. How many toes are there? 10. Part of potter's clay and part of iron. That's what the feet and the toes. So as the Roman Empire gets towards the end, it switches from being just iron to iron and clay. Interesting, huh? It says, and this is why. It says it will be a divided kingdom. Is the Roman Empire divided now? Yeah, I'd say it is. But there will be in it the strength of iron, because you saw iron mixed with miry clay. Then when we get even further along, as the toes and feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly broken. Now think about the nations that kind of form up the Roman Empire, or what was the Roman Empire. Some of them are real strong nations. But do you know there's some that are just real weak nations? Yeah. And there's some that are strong, some that are weak. Just what Daniel said was going to happen as the Roman Empire broke apart. It will be a divided kingdom. Yeah, I think it is, especially at the end times. As we get to the end times, the number 10 becomes real significant. So I think you're thinking of the next verse. So we haven't got there yet. So I wanted to show you this statue. So you can kind of see the head of gold, the Babylonian, and of course it says the lion. That's another vision that's coming later on down the line. But you got the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, and then the fragmented kingdoms, the fragmented kingdoms of the Roman Empire. So that's kind of an idea of what he saw. We don't know that that's the exact image of what he saw, but that's one that we made up that kind of shows all that. So you got the head of gold, and the breasts and arms of silver, and the belly and thighs of brass, and the legs of iron, and the feet and toes of iron and clay. So it goes on to say, and this is where it gets a little strange, towards the end times. It says, whereas you saw the iron mixed with, and you said, miry clay. Okay? The iron mixed with miry clay, they will mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they will not cling to one another. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Even as iron does not mingle with clay. So it's talking about mingling. It's talking about clinging to. It says, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, nor will the sovereignty of it be left to another people, but it will break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it will stand forever. Okay? Interesting verse here, especially verse 43 to me. Because it says, you saw the iron and mixed with the miry clay, but it says, they will mingle themselves with the seed of men. Who is they? they will mingle themselves with the seed of men. That seed, we know that's talking about having babies, really. Seed, right? And so, but who's the they? So the they, if the they is going to mingle with the seed of men, the they has to be something different than men. Yeah. Yeah, and so that bears the question, who is the they? The they that isn't man, because who is it? Maybe. There's theories on it, but it could be the Nephilim. It could be. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying it could be. It wouldn't surprise me. I know that whoever or whatever it is, it's something that is different. And it's interesting, that word there, that for the they and stuff, it means it means that they exist. It means to exist. And I don't know what that means exactly. It's some kind of thing or person or whatever that exists. Yeah. And so, but they're going to mingle with men, whatever they are. Now, we'll just look at this verse, because this is what a lot of people think, that it's the fallen angels. And you go back to Genesis, and before the flood, in Genesis 6, it says there were giants. And that word for giants in the Hebrew is Nephilim. Okay? So it says, and there were Nephilim, or giants, in the earth in those days, in the days of Noah. But then it says this weird statement. And it says, and also what? After that. So not only were they in the days of Noah, they were in the days after that. And that word for after that means the hind part or the in part. Okay? Or again, and there were again these Nephilim, which here is interpreted giants, because they were apparently very large. And as you read the Bible, you'll find that Goliath was a Nephilim, and his brothers, and there was a kind of a whole group of them still back in that day. It says, and these Nephilim got on the earth when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. And the word for daughter of men there is the daughters of Adam. That's the word for man, and that's the word you commonly see for man in the Old Testament. Adam, the daughters of Adam. And they bore children to these sons of God, and those children became mighty men, or Gibor, champions, chiefs of the earth. They became the champions. A lot of people think this is where we get our Greek mythology from. Like Hercules was a son of Zeus and human, right? And you can go with all those Perseus, all those Greek mythological gods. Well, where did those ideas come from? Well, a lot of people say they came from here that they actually happened. And so these guys became mighty men. And the interesting thing here is the word for men is not mighty Adam, right? Which you would think it would be if they were talking about the race of Adam. It's a whole different word, okay? And they were men of renown. And again, that's a different word. It's inowash, and it means that they were just mortal. Now, if you're mortal, that means you can die, right? So, interesting. Is that what Daniel's talking about when he's talking about they? I don't know. Maybe. but maybe not. I don't know. Something to think about. I only know what the Bible says to me, and after studying it all that I've studied it, but I don't know. All I know is they are different than the seed of man, whoever they are, because they mingle with the seed of man, but they can't adhere. Okay, the mingle doesn't stick. Okay, so anyway, some weird stuff. And so it talks about that this in those days where all this is happening. By the way, I don't know if you know, but there's it's going to take too long. But have you noticed that the military, that the media, they're starting to tell you about things that once were secret? They're starting to say, yeah, there are UFOs. There are unidentified flying objects. Yeah, there are space aliens. That stuff is starting to come out actually from our military secrets. And you wonder, well, what are they hiding? We've always assumed, or a lot of people, that the military is hiding secrets from. Well, they are. There's a lot of secrets that they hide from us. But now they're starting to kind of be released. Well, why is that? Why is it all of a sudden that they're starting to release that information to make us more accepting to the idea? I don't know. Yeah. So, what's going to happen during the rapture? Think about the rapture, right? How are they going to explain that? How is the world going to explain the rapture? Right? Where men are just caught up into space. How are they going to explain that? They're going to explain it by saying they were abducted by aliens. How else are you going to explain that? Right? And so now we're starting to hear about UFOs a lot more again, and even the military is saying, yes, it's true. Yeah, right. 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 Yeah, you're seeing that now, huh? Yeah. Right. Yeah, it remains to be seen, huh? Yeah. So, and anyway, and there's a lot that our government hides from us for the betterment of our mental health. Yeah. So anyway, here's a mind which has wisdom. It says in Revelation, God said, really, there are 7 mountains on which a woman sits, and this is about the woman and the beast. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. 5 fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. So you think that there was only 7, but there's 8, right? And he is of the 7 and goes into perdition. This is at the end times. And the 10 horns, remember that number 10? The 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings that haven't received a kingdom as yet, but will receive power as kings for 1 hour. That means a season. That doesn't necessarily mean 1 hour like 60 minutes. Okay, it means for a season. With the beast. And these have one mind and will give their power and strength to the beast. Daniel saw and talks about when Jesus comes, 10 toes. We have 10 toes. We have 10 kings. at the end times. Looks like there may be a connection there. Okay? Well, Daniel goes on. He says, because you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will happen hereafter. He has made known to you, Nebuchadnezzar, what's going to happen. All the way that hereafter means to the latter days. So we should know, because, guys, we are living in the toes. We're in the fallen, the kingdom that's apart. We're living in the toe time. Okay? Yeah, the toe time. Oh, boy. That's the time when Jesus is coming back. Okay? And he said, I love this, he said, and the dream is what? Certain. It is absolutely certain. And the interpretation that I just gave you, guess what? You can count on it. It's sure. This is exactly how it's going to happen. And what we have seen, and we get to be on the back side of this is exactly what's happened. Perfectly what has happened in time. How did Daniel know that? How did Nebuchadnezzar dream that? How did Daniel know that before it ever happened? Because God says, I can tell you what's going to happen. Let any other god try that. I dare them. Can't be done. You might get lucky and predict something just out of pure dumb luck, especially if you're general enough. Like I think, you know, who knows what. You could say something that just has a real general, but getting real specific, God gets real specific. He was real specific about Jesus Christ and him coming to earth. So specific that the probability is astronomical. In fact, the probability is so astronomical you would say it doesn't exist. It can't be done. It's like 10 to the 30 or 43rd or something like that. It's just astronomical. I had one guy say it like this. He said, if you took the state of Texas and you filled it full of silver dollars up to your knee, and you colored one, and you threw it out there, it could be under, it could be wherever, and you blindfolded a man, and you said, go pick out that coin. Start him at the edge somewhere. And he picked out that coin. That's the same probability that what God said about Jesus Christ would come true. In other words, the probability is statistically zero. Anyway, we got to get moving. So I'm going to skip a few. We know that Jesus is the stone. So Daniel, it says, so this is what the king said. The king made Daniel great. That means chief, head, and gave him a great many gifts and made him to rule over the whole province. He put him in charge of the whole province of Babylon, and to be chief governor over all the wise men of Babylon. So he was the head of the wise men too. He was the dude. And Daniel requested, now listen, this is why I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were there. Daniel requested of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. See, Daniel didn't just think of himself because he's Daniel. He thought of his friends, and I think his friends were with him. That's why he said, we will show you the interpretation. But Daniel, he was in the gate of the king. That means the people came to him for answers. That's what happened to Daniel. I want to show you this one. I skipped it, but it says after Nebuchadnezzar heard, he fell on his face and he worshipped Daniel. That's what they did back then. They were pagans, right? And commanded that they should offer sweet offering and odors to him. The king answered to Daniel and said, of a truth, your God is the God of gods. So Nebuchadnezzar came to the realization that Daniel's God was the God of gods and the Lord of kings. He was it. And he is the revealer of secrets, seeing that you have been able to reveal this secret. And then he gave Daniel all this stuff, which he said would happen if you could interpret his dream. But who got the glory? God did. See, of a truth. That's why Daniel got the dream to reveal to him. It wasn't because Daniel was a super brain, although I think he was, and had a lot of common sense on how to do things, but he got it because so that he could tell Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? All right. Any questions? Any thoughts? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Could, sure. That'd be a season, yeah. A time. It means just a period of time. Yeah. Okay, let's pray. Father, we just thank you for your word today and just pray that you would help us to understand